We're live. Calix Boxing, D-Style Boxing. We are here. It's Wednesday evening. We're getting into the second half of the week. We're almost to the weekend. We got Danny Garcia coming back this weekend. We're all super excited about that. Also, I'm sorry for coming on here late. We're about a half hour after the schedule, but we were working our back channels trying to see what's happening between Spence and Crawford, right? The negotiations. And
It could have been announced.
D-Style are telling me that the Murder Hornets will be here before Spence and Crawford are signing. What's your sources telling you on that?
My sources have told me that anyone who said anything about this fight are full of shit. That's what my sources have told me.
But
people guaranteeing the fight. Oh, I already know it's going to happen, or people saying it's not going to happen, or people ain't nobody know anything, bro. Not even you think. I don't even think Spence and Crawford know this shit's going to happen. To be honest with you, I hope it happens.
So do I. Now let's get into the topic. Make sure to hit that like button as you come in. Make sure to hit that poll, yes or no. The poll is up. Also, we're going to be getting into this, and I want y'all to throw out some suggestions as to other examples of this that we can use. Now, this is Days of Futures Past. Now, what we're going to do, explain to them what we're going to do in this show, D-Style.
Hey, look, for those that are not familiar with the X-Men series, or the comics, the cartoons, they even made a movie about it. You know what I mean? They go back in time before the Sentinels were created, because they killed off all the mutants. You know what I mean? It was the end of the mutants, and everybody keeps talking about boxing's dying. Boxing is like it's not in a good state. You know what I mean? Where did this happen? So we need to go back and explore the things that could have altered for better, for worse, and we want to know what you guys think, of course. So we need to go back and pinpoint times that really had a big effect in the change in boxing. You know what I mean? And to today, it's obviously the Castillo Floyd fight decision.
Okay, now let's pretend that you and I were judges for that fight.
So I'm going to be checking out the ring girl instead of watching the fight?
Yes. Who did you have winning Mayweather Castillo 1? Who did you have winning?
You know what? I scored it for Castillo, 7 rounds to 5, brother. 7 rounds to 5, and a solid 7, by the way. A solid 7 rounds for Castillo.
As did I. And to Mayweather's credit, he would go on to win the rematch, avenge the win-loss. And there was a reason there was a rematch, because it was a win-loss. But let's pretend, let's go back into our DeLorean. Let's go back to the future and pretend that you and I were official judges' scorecards, and you and I had him winning, and Castillo wins by split decision.
And still, lightweight champion, Jose Luis Castillo. You know, he celebrates with Chavez. He's the former sparring partner of Chavez. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So how do you think that would have altered Floyd Mayweather's history and the history of boxing, perhaps?
Sure. I mean, let's talk about the immediate aftermath of what that would have been, right? Castillo beating Mayweather would have been considered an upset. Obviously, Castillo was a good fighter, but Mayweather, I believe I don't think I'm mistaken, but I do believe he was favored in that fight. People kind of expected him to put on a great performance like he did against Genaro Hernandez. Maybe they thought it would be a little tougher, but he wasn't expected to win. He wasn't expected to put on a performance like that. It was a close fight, competitive fight, but I feel Castillo clearly won. And I think most people feel he won. If the judges would have given it to him, and me and Calix are two of the judges, he would have won at least a majority decision. And at that point, Jose Luis Castillo would have still been a lightweight champion. Jose Luis Castillo, first of all, would have had probably the biggest win in the history of Mexican fighters, really. I mean, it'll be up there, top 3, easy. Right? Who knows where that would put Castillo would be in the first ballot Hall of Famer with a win like that, to be honest with you. And I think his career might have been different, right? Because a lot of promoters would have used him, even like I believe Mayweather would have beat him in the rematch, right?
Oh yeah.
But he would have still had that win over Mayweather, though. That would have made him marketable. It would have made him the A side and far more like maybe he would be the A side against Haddon, and he doesn't go over there to fight him. Like a lot of things would have been different for Jose Luis Castillo. And he probably doesn't get knocked out in the 10th round against Corrales, who was spitting out the mouthpiece. You know what I mean? Like I'm just saying. So I think Castillo might have. I don't think they would have put him number one pound for pound because that style is not something that the pundits put as number one pound for pound. They like the outboxer style. A boxer. They like those guys to be number one pound for pound, right? But Castillo would have been there. He would have been a top 5 pound for pound for sure, and that would have been the immediate aftermath. I think Mayweather would have done the rematch. And I think Mayweather would have had even a better spectacular performance in the rematch against Castillo. That's at least the immediate aftermath. That's what I believe Floyd Mayweather would have done. He would have corrected the first fight. He would have won the rematch, maybe, right? And I think he wins in because that second fight was close as well. People act like it was one side. It was not. I scored it for Floyd, but I had that one like 8-4 for Floyd, but it was competitive. You know what I mean? But we probably get a trilogy. Because there'll be 1-1. The second fight would have been competitive, and I think Floyd ekes out the trilogy, and it would have been the only trilogy in the career of Floyd Mayweather Jr. That's what would have happened if he would have gotten that decision, Alex. The immediate aftermath, anyway.
The immediate aftermath before we get into aftermath
Sure.
is, yes, we would have gotten a trilogy, 1 loss, 1 win, and then I think Floyd obviously wins the trilogy, but had Castillo gotten that decision, I agree with you that Castillo likely loses by more in the second fight because I think Floyd would have came out more aggressive, much like Roy, right after the Montel Griffin first fight. I think he comes out super aggressive, and then I think Floyd would have done a similar thing against Castillo. But I want to focus on Castillo real quick before we get into more of what's going on with Floyd here. Is Castillo. And this is why we talk about, like, people do this thing where they say, yeah, he won the official decision, but look, the public said he won the fight, so he won the fight. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in history. The victor gets to say what happened in history, right? The victor always controls history. Right. So what happens here is Castillo doesn't get credit for the Mayweather victory, the first one, which makes a huge difference in Castillo's career, like you said, with Hall of Fame. But also, if you go back to that Corrales-Castillo fight, that's another one. Like, what if Corrales isn't able to spit out his mouthpiece 87,000 times in that fight? Does Castillo get the victory in that fight? Does he get a knockout victory? Does he get a stoppage victory in that fight if Corrales isn't able to spit out his mouthpiece a bunch of times in that fight?
I think it's a different Castillo in that fight. I don't think he's as aggressive because he's trying to prove a point or something. It would be a more confident Castillo. That little difference, I don't even think the spin out the mouthpiece would have been an issue. I think he beats Corrales.
Yeah, and I'm seeing people throw out other examples and keep doing that in the chat because we're going to do more of these in the future.
Yeah, we're going to pinpoint those in the future. You know what I mean? We're not going to give away the farm and win an episode, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I mean?
I love the Fury versus Wilder example. I love the Canelo versus Triple G example. I would throw out Jack Catterall against Josh Taylor, Regis Prograis against Josh Taylor. They're all, but as far as this one, the immediate aftermath, I agree with you. I think there's a trilogy. I think Floyd wins a trilogy 2-1. But I think Castillo gets credit for that first victory, and that's huge for his legacy. Huge. And this is why this is important with judging. This is why we focus on it so much. We focus on the corruption with judging, with sanctioning bodies, with promoters, managers. But with judging, it's the easiest one to use, right? Because these controversial decisions, they make a big difference in a guy's career. Huge. Castillo moves up the pound for pound rankings. Floyd's no longer 1, 2 in the pound for pound rankings. Makes a big difference.
At least in the immediate after. I think he goes back to number 1 if he beats Castillo twice after that, to be honest with you. But now, before we get to the long-term aftermath, do you think that maybe like Floyd coming out more aggressive against Castillo in the second fight would make Castillo possibly make him more dangerous? You know what I mean? And he could hurt Floyd, and maybe he does win the rematch because Floyd is trying to overcome, a fight that he lost. That's always a possibility.
No, I don't. I think Floyd wins that rematch 10 out of 10 times. Whether he loses or wins, I don't think it affects the rematch at all.
For sure.
It affects legacies. It affects how they carry on their careers, but it doesn't affect that second fight. Floyd wins that second fight. Win or
Okay.
loss in the first one.
All right.
He wins that second fight.
So the way you see it is, say the first fight played out, because I see Puro Suda saying, I don't think it was a robbery. We're not making the argument that it was a robbery. So the exact same fight, but the judges judge it differently.
Right.
How would that's what I want you guys to focus on. Well, how would things be different if that was different? You know what I mean? Like, we know it's the same fight, regardless of the 3 old farts that scored it. You know what I mean? But if they would have scored it for Castillo, obviously things would have been different. Floyd would have had a loss. So here, I want to go to this guy. I want to talk about the long-term effects, right? Since Floyd Mayweather would have had a loss, look, he would have avenged it. I think we would have probably had a trilogy, and Floyd would have come out on top of that trilogy, right? We might remember that trilogy as one of the historic trilogies, for all we know, right? And I think Floyd would take more risk. I think Floyd wouldn't be protecting the O because he wouldn't have an O anymore. I think when the opportunity came to fight a Martinez at middleweight for a legacy fight, he would have taken that fight. Okay. I think he might have ended his career with 2 or 3 losses, but boy, I believe we would have seen everything from a Margarito to a Paul Williams to even a Joshua Clottey. We would have seen like all types of names on his resume, and he would have actually gone for legacy a little more, especially with like an undersized for a middleweight in a way, Martinez, right? I think he would have done more, right? And furthermore, it would have spared us this new era of protecting the O. It would have spared us because that's how Floyd marketed himself. Oh, 47F tried, 47F failed. That became a marketing scheme for Floyd. There's no blueprint to beat me. Became a marketing scheme for Floyd. For better or for worse, it's how he marketed himself, and that's how the new crop, the new generation, that's what they do, right? They protect their O. Fights take forever to get made. Why? Because they're protecting their O. A young gun wants his title shot. Oh, he ain't ready. He's going to lose if he fights him now. Like, that mentality, I don't think would have been prevalent in the sport of boxing. And in my opinion, that mentality has actually hurt the sport of boxing. It's hurt it. That's why fights have taken so long to get made, in my personal opinion.
We've talked about this on this channel ad nauseum, and people might get tired of hearing me say it, is the new culture versus the old culture, the old boxing culture versus the new culture, how it's even it's unfair to the old fighters to be compared to the new fighters, who, all respect to them, we respect the fighters of today, but compared to old fighters, bubble wrap. Yeah, it's bubble wrap for the most part. So
yeah, for sure.
What I'm saying here is it's we have to pinpoint when this new culture started. We have to pinpoint when the protect the O started. We have to pinpoint when, in order to fix it, we have to pinpoint when this cautious risk taking, like the low risk, high reward, this very cautious way of moving forward began. And we've talked about boxing fans being propagandized to talk like promoters, managers, network execs, but who was the fighter of this era who talked most like a promoter? In my opinion, It was Floyd. It was, I have to protect my O. I want to protect my O. I want to be low risk, high reward, et cetera, while at the same time selling you a different bag of goods, that he's fighting all these world champions, 23 world champions, and all this stuff. But to me, that was it's a great detriment to the sport. Right. That, look, whatever Floyd wanted to do with his career, that's him. That's him. My issue is fighters using this blueprint of old Floyd, not pretty boy Floyd, but the money Mayweather Floyd. So where I'm coming in the gate, I'm 3 or 4 years into my career, I'm going to take 6 to 9 months off and then fight. I'm gonna fight against a guy I know I'm gonna beat. Then I'm gonna take another 6 to 9 months off. I'm gonna fight, and that's the new way. The old way was James Toney constantly defending his belt, Bernard Hopkins constantly defending his belt, Oscar De La Hoya fighting in 11 world championships by the time he was 23 years old. It was guys taking risks, going after legacy. Now it's And Leonard Ellerby's out there saying it. He's not hiding it. Now
Yeah.
it's the new era. We don't care about the
Yeah,
belts.
yeah.
We care about protecting our
Bullshit.
O. We care about, we're not worried about the championships. We're worried about the face of boxing. And this is the face of boxing era. This is the economics era of boxing. This is not the legacy sport era of boxing. And that's the frustrating part of me. And I think a lot of it, the reason we do this show, I think a lot of it has to do with Floyd being undefeated.
Yeah, for sure. Like a lot is made out of winning and losing. Now, winning and losing matters. Don't get me wrong. It's a sport. Winning is the ultimate. I get all that, right? But I want people to focus on this just a little bit. The discussion is not whether or not the fight was a robbery. I just want to make sure people understand that. That's not the discussion at all. The discussion is this. It's the same exact fight. The same from the beginning bell to the ending bell. The same exact fight happens. But the judges give it to the other guy, Castillo, right? It's the same exact fight, but because 3 judges saw it differently that night, would that really mean that Mayweather is less of a fighter because 3 judges decided to give it to Castillo that night? Or is he the same exact fighter? I would argue he's the same exact fight. He's the same exact fighter. If he takes more risk and he loses in the process because he's more active and is taking more risk, he's still the same great fighter. It's just that the circumstances were different. I argue that in this simple age of, well, undefeated, no blueprint to beat him, he's the best ever, right? Okay, cool. That's how you feel. I completely disagree. But if Floyd Mayweather Jr. would have lost that night, same fight. Let's say like, you would be talking about how I thought Floyd won that fight. Okay, that's your opinion, right? We would still be having the same discussion about who won, who didn't win. But officially, Castillo would have won. Then Floyd couldn't talk about. Floyd himself said this, guys. Okay. When Floyd was being interviewed about the Bradley Pacquiao fight, who most feel Pacquiao won, right? He himself said, hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you slice it, how you dice it, how you sell it. A loss is a loss. That's what he said, right? So if he would have lost that night, there is no blueprint to beat him talking point. There is no protecting the old talking point. There is no, 50 I've tried, 50 I've failed, because he would have had a loss on his record. Okay? At least one. But I believe, before I take it to Calix, I believe that if he would have lost, he would have taken more risk. He might have lost another, maybe he doesn't, maybe he does, I don't know. But he would have taken more risk. Maybe he loses another time or two. But we see a lot of the fights we wanted to see. Okay, at the times that we wanted to see them. I honestly believe that. Furthermore, we don't have this protecting the old era that everyone knows is around today. Like everybody knows it, right? So people instead, people would be saying, hey, look, Floyd lost, and look, he still had a great career. That's what they would have been saying, right? So that's where we are.
That's where we are. And I like the point you just brought up. And once again, to reiterate, we're not saying that it was a controversial or it was a robbery. This was a debatable decision. What we're saying is, even if Floyd, the reason I like this is even if Floyd doesn't get the not on the scorecards, he's still the same guy who fought that night.
Yeah.
But he has one loss, and he takes more risks, and I think that's for the betterment of boxing. And you could throw out examples like Sergey Kovalev versus Andre Ward. Same thing. Like Andre Ward's still the same fighter, but he came out with the loss. But the reason this is important is because the win and loss is important. It is important for legacy. This is important for legacy. Like Castillo's legacy is much different. In the case I just brought up, Ward's legacy is much different. Doesn't retire undefeated. Calzaghe against Hopkins. Have they given it to Hopkins? Calzaghe's is much different. And we'll end up going over all of these. But what I'm saying is it matters. It matters. Although it's the same fighter, it matters. And I can't think of an example in this case where judges' scorecards mattered more in a close fight than this one. Because I think Floyd staying undefeated altered the course of boxing going forward. It ended up doing that because this new era, this protect the O, this new culture, it's a detriment to the sport. Like, I wanted to see an aggressive Floyd later on in his career. I wanted to see him fight Sergio Martinez at whatever weight, because had he fought Sergio Martinez, say at 155 catchweight, win the middleweight title, just think of how he's viewed then as a multi-division champion. You can compare him to Ray Leonard fighting Marvin Hagler. You can make comparisons like that. And then we gotta throw this out there too. Like, this record of 50-0. What is he? 50-0, 50-0, 1-0.
Yeah.
It's not a real record, D-Style. It's not a real record. Like, there are fighters like Packy McFarland. People won't know the name, but his official record is, I believe, 70-0-5. So he never lost a fight, and he ended up having more wins. So this isn't even a real record. The record of 23 title holders, that's...
When Chavez surpassed 49, nobody was saying, "Oh my God, he broke the record." Like, nobody was saying that. 49-0 was always a heavyweight record, and somehow it got all boxing got involved in this record all of a sudden for some reason. You know what I mean? But it's whatever to me with that. But look, winning and losing matters.
Do you think this is the case here? Do you
I think Canelo is trying to tie somewhat undisputed big fights and has suspended spotless record, but the PBC still seems to be under Floyd's spell. I mean, there's some truth to it, yes, in my opinion.
Because I was hoping when Canelo started to be aggressive, and he's already got losses, that, okay, we're turning a table here. Bam Rodriguez is doing the same thing, something similar, but I don't see enough fighters going that way. I don't see enough fighters.
This is what needs to happen. Some of these good fighters are going to take some losses. They're going to come back, and that's when people are going to learn. Like, you know what I mean? Like, enough right now. A lot of these new fans, they haven't been around long enough to understand that shit happens. Like, for example, we've been watching boxing long enough to understand that Duran beat Leonard, right? Leonard beat Hearns, and Hearns destroyed Duran. But we've been around long enough to know that, and we were there watching it. We witnessed it. We witnessed Barrera beat Morales, Pacquiao destroy Barrera, and then Morales comes and beats Pacquiao. We've been watching long enough to know that Jermaine Taylor defeated long-reigning champion Bernard Hopkins, right? And then Pavlik beats Taylor, and then Hopkins dominates Pavlik. We've been watching long enough to understand these things, but a lot of these fans, bro, they haven't been watching long enough to witness those things. Like
they think that all the fights take place on paper,
right?
And that's the issue. Is we've been here long enough to know the fights don't take place on paper, and when you fight the fights, the upsets happen. The fights don't happen on paper in this new era, this new age. And I don't want to be the fuddy-duddy sitting on the
look. I mean, if Castillo
sitting on the porch saying, "Oh, the new music they listen to sucks." I promise I would never be that dude. But we need boxing to go into that new. We need Canelo needs to be the blueprint of the next guy.
Like, the blueprint should be face the best, and however the cards fall, then they may. But people need to hold fighters that don't fight the best accountable, right? I go back to the same fucking thing. If the same exact fight happens and the judges scored a draw, it's still the same fight. They're still the same fighters. If Castillo wants a split decision, it's still the same fight. They're still the same fighters. What part of that isn't clicking with people? Like, they're the same fighters. And now I do agree with you that winning and losing matters in terms of perception, but perception is not always reality, Calix. Like, whoever gets a decision in a close fight or razor thin, like we just saw on Dogbe against Hoyt, right? After I watched that fight, I said, look, whoever gets a decision gets it. Like, no one could complain, but either guy could win, right? Like, that's one example. Another example is if the judges give the decision to Triple G, right, both times, Canelo is still the same exact dude that we see today. He's the same fighter, right? If they would have robbed Bivol, right? Canelo and Bivol are still the same fighters.
Real quick, let me push it back on that real quick.
Sure.
I understand what you're saying, but the perception of Golovkin going 0-1-1 in that, let's use that as the case. It matters. Like, it matters. when we talk about Hall of Fame, when we talk about
Of
legacy.
course, it
Like I
matters
said,
because results matter.
Kovalev not getting the decision against Ward. I understand they're the same fighters, but that matters when we talk about legacy,
No, but what
right?
I'm saying, Calix, is it's like you're taking a one fight and saying, okay, well, winning would have mattered. My argument is this: if Floyd loses to Castillo, right,
Mm-hmm.
the status of Castillo would rise, and him beating him in the rematch, and they do a trilogy, right, and settle the score that way, similar to Ali did with Frazier, would enhance his legacy, believe it or not. Because
Right.
if Ali fights Frazier and boxes him easy, 12-0 in their first fight, and that's it, Frazier ain't remembered as the fighter that he was. He's not remembered to do that, beat Ali and gave him 2 hell fights afterwards. That the fact that he beat Frazier twice, and people are like, oh yeah, well, Frazier was good. He beat Ali one time and he won that tournament. He was a heavyweight champion. Frazier was that dude. That enhances it, in my opinion. Like, I'm looking at the macro. Like, I believe that Floyd would have taken more risk, and maybe he does in his career with 2-3 losses, but his resume would have been more stacked and filled with better opposition, therefore better, in my opinion, right? There's no way to know that, obviously, but it's all conjecture, but that's what I honestly believe. Because, look, Robinson had losses. He's a consensus best of all time in the opinion of a lot of people.
Ali,
Chavez eventually lost, but look, people look at him, hey, one of the best of all time, right?
Ali, Henry Armstrong, they all had them.
And one more example. So like, of course, results matter, no doubt, right? Like whoever wins. Like the Bills are the same exact team. They're the same great team, whether or not Norwood makes a fucking field goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that he missed the field goal, somehow people downgrade that team, but because results matter. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day. So yes, in terms of one fight, of course it would matter. But I believe that was early enough in Floyd's career to where he would have had no longer protecting the O. He would have taken more chances and he would have fought bigger. He would have been we might be calling him like a 6th division world champion. Probably not.
Better accolades even without the loss.
I believe
And that
so.
proves our point that just because you have a loss doesn't make you worse than the guy with no losses. Just because you have 10 losses doesn't make you worse than the guy with 8 losses. It's not the case. It's about what you achieve. It's about how you come back from the loss. It's life, right? You can't succeed until you fail. Failing is part of it, so you can't take
Like,
that
we
out of
see
it.
that we see that in basketball, right? Like that shot at the end determines who's the best.
Mm-hmm.
But does it because that's just the way it's played, right? Like somebody just said, whatever, Ray Allen missed that 3. History's different, right? Without a doubt. But like in other sports, though, it's different. The only reason it's different in other sports than boxing, in other sports, they don't get to pick and choose who they face, and like you know what I mean. Like they have a set schedule. They got to go to the playoffs. You got to play the best. You got to win the championship. In boxing, they do get to pick and choose. And Floyd got to like Jordan couldn't I don't want to play the Suns. Like he couldn't do that. Floyd could have said, I don't want to fight this dude. He's with Showtime. That nobody knows who he is. I'm not going to fight Paul Williams. I'm not going to fight this dude and that dude. So that's why it's a little different, in my opinion, with boxing.
Right. Just to piggyback off this, it's the reason I throw out, and I've been consistent with this. I think that Froch has a greater legacy than Calzaghe, even though Froch has 2 losses. I've thrown that out. I don't want to bore people with that. But my ultimate point is just because you have losses and the other guy doesn't have a loss, you could have a greater, if you have a better resume, you can have a greater legacy, in my opinion, than the other guy. But before I get to this question, because I love this question right here. Is it a given that Floyd would have gone on, even if he loses, would have gone on to fight Paul Williams, Antonio Margarito, Carlos Quintana, Josh Cloudy?
It makes it more likely.
It makes it more likely. It's not a given, but it makes it more likely. The percentages go up drastically. Yes. Drastically. And just imagine a Floyd who runs through that tough 147-pound division. Imagine a Floyd. You remember the welterweight division at this time we're talking about when we had Cotto. We had a prime Cotto. We had Margarito. Remember Margarito approached Floyd Mayweather at the press conference or Floyd's giving an interview, and Floyd just looked.
A lot of Floyd fans are going to like this. And I made a video about this years ago, but he punked Floyd, bro. Floyd looked weak in that situation.
I think they
remember the energy he had for like. Remember, like,
right?
Let me put it this way. Shortly after that, Floyd signed to fight De La Hoya. With De La Hoya, he approached De La Hoya and was talking all mad shit. Oh, I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. Why wasn't he doing that with Margarito?
Mm-hmm.
A little different, like, you know what I mean? Now, granted, with all that said, does Floyd beat Margarito? I would favor him to beat him. There's no guarantee, you know what I mean? But I just think he knew it would be a tough fight, though. Like you could beat a guy 10 rounds to 2, and like it was a tough night out. You know what I mean? And we kind of saw that in the Maidana fights, although Floyd was a little older, but still, you kind of saw in the Castillo fight. It's like, yeah, I'll beat this dude, but it's gonna be a rough night out. I don't know if I want that. You know what I mean?
But the thing is, if you look at the welterweight division, then Cotto, Prime Margarito, Quintana, Clottey, Zab Judah, who he fought. But think about this name right here, Paul Williams. And remember, Paul Williams and Antonio Margarito fought each other because nobody was lining up to fight them. You got Kermit Cintron that was in the mix. But imagine Floyd running through that division.
Imagine Floyd running through that. And I'll tell you right now, Calix, he would be favored in all those fights.
Yes, he would.
And the other thing, I think he makes a better run at 154. You know what I mean? I think it's likely, you might disagree with this one, he probably fights when you're right at 154, right? That's an interesting one. Mm-hmm. Imagine he had Winky Wright in his resume, Paul Williams in his resume, Margarito in his resume,
Vernon Forrest.
Vernon Forrest in his resume. Like, I'm just saying, let's say, like, out of all those names I mentioned, he loses one of those. It's still impressive, bro.
Or even two. I mean? Or even two.
And then let's say, what if he fights Martinez? And look, this is not, before people, you guys are Monday morning quarterbacking. No, we weren't. I remember myself, Calix, and others on here and on Rope-A-Dope Radio saying Floyd should fight Martinez. Martinez is a 154-pound dude being a champion at 160.
Not only did we say that, we also said that, if I remember correctly, that we felt like that was a better fight stylistically than the Pacquiao fight.
Yeah, like I thought that was a good legacy fight, and Floyd would have been like from lightweight to middleweight. That's legacy, brother. Being a champion in all those weight classes. And Martinez said it a million times. I'll fight this dude at 155. And you know what? You want to know the sad part? Even after it was like his knee was shot, he still wouldn't fight him, and he allowed Miguel Cotto to go snatch that. You know what I mean? And then he tried to take credit for it after Cotto did it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's just the truth, man. Like, look, obviously the guy's a Hall of Famer. He had a great career. I'm only arguing that if that night, same fight, the judges score for Castillo, everything is different.
Everything's different. And even with multiple losses, though, Floyd is still considered that dude. By guys like me, I would still consider him the pound-for-pound guy. Like, Canelo loses, I only knock him down to 4. Like, I would have never knocked Floyd any less than 3, even after a loss. He was Floyd. And a Floyd fighting top competition, what that would have done for boxing?
He would have fought Costa Tzu, brother, I believe.
Costa Tzu.
I forgot about him. Yeah.
But just think of what that Floyd would have given boxing as opposed to what we got. And this is my whole point about Floyd. Like, nobody respects Floyd's skill as much as we, I'm sure people do, but we respect Floyd's skill to the utmost. We still think Floyd's a legendary fighter. We're not saying Floyd lost to Castillo. We're just throwing it out there. We're not saying that he would have lost to any of those welterweight.
It's just my opinion that he lost. Like, I just scored it for Castillo. You know
but what I'm saying is, just think of what a great, aggressive Floyd would have given boxing. Imagine the Floyd that would have fought Manny in 2009.
But I have a question for you, though.
Imagine the Floyd that hold on. Imagine the Floyd that would have fought Manny in 2009.
Yeah.
Better fight. A rematch in 2010. Better fight. A trilogy in 2011.
Dude. I have a question for you, though. and
Mm-hmm.
it goes to the chat. This one's a little tough though because there might be an answer that we don't like. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Is Floyd Mayweather the big pay-per-view draw that he became with the loss on his record and fighting the best fights? Because we see it all the time. The guys that are fighting the best fights, they're not like rewarded by the fans. They reward the guys that are avoiding fights and are protecting their own. That's who they're rewarding. You know what I mean? So if Floyd, like I think we both have agreed that he would have had a better boxing legacy. But would he have done the 2 point some million against is there something to people wanted to see him lose, and that was a big part of the market. You know what I mean? He became a heel. He was Money Mayweather. He was flashing the money. Oh, what are you gonna do? And nobody could beat me. That was a big part of it. What do you think? Is he as big of a pay-per-view star?
The answer that I would like to tell myself, yes, even bigger. The real answer, likely not, right? He marketed himself perfectly as the heel. It came down to marketing. But here's the thing, though. Could he still have marketed himself that way without the O? And I think he could have. Like, could Floyd,
I don't
let's say the
know.
Floyd
I
that
don't
loses
know.
to Castillo, say the Floyd that loses to Castillo, but then beats him in the second and third fight, still comes into talks trash to Oscar De La Hoya in the 4-part 24/7 series, because that was the build up to Floyd. That was Floyd's introduction to the world, right? So I think that Floyd could still present himself to the world the same way with one loss
No.
instead of zero.
I agree that he could have, and look,
The Floyd's aura, much of it came from that 24/7 series.
no, I get
Floyd
that,
made
Alex,
that
but
series.
what made it intriguing was the fact that
Is it though?
the answer is yes, that he could still market himself as Money Mayweather, right? You and I would still know, hey, he's a good fighter, like you know what I mean. But I think the public at large in this very simpleton era, right, wouldn't grasp like that, in my opinion, because I think part of it was I want to see this motherfucker lose. That was a big. I honestly believe that was a big part of
I
what
don't know.
sold his fights. To be
I'm
honest
not
with
so
you,
sure because
we need to ask the chat. I want to know what the chat thinks because I don't think he would have been as big.
he would have still been marketed as the pound for pound champ. How he marketed himself in that 24/7 was huge for his career. He
Would it be
turned
pound for
heel.
pound champ though? And Pocket, because then you had Pocket. Like the only thing that I think would give him the edge against Pocket was that he was undefeated. You know what I mean?
Going into the Oscar fight, he was seen as the pound for pound king, not Manny.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
True.
Now, would he still have been seen as the pound for pound king had he done what we said, avenged that Castillo loss? He would have.
Yes.
He's the pound for pound king going into that fight. He's the heel. He's talking trash to Oscar. He's got 50 Cent right next to him talking trash to Oscar. Okay. That's what made Floyd into.
But does 50 Cent roll with him if he had a loss?
I think so.
I don't know. You know, man, I don't know. I believe that, this is my opinion.
Do you think Oscar fights him if he had a loss?
I think he would have still been a pay-per-view star. I don't think he would have been as big. And I think that's not the answer I want, believe me. But it's just the unfortunate, it's like the inconvenient truth to me that he marketed himself in a way where his zero was like the selling point. You know what I mean?
And we can't let history repeat itself because Tank is attempting the same thing right now, except Tank didn't go through the Pretty Boy Floyd era. Tank picked it up in the Money Mayweather era. Tank inherited the Rolodex from Floyd. And Floyd took it and ran with it, which is why Tank continues to stay with Floyd. He knows he's got the gravy train as long as he does. So we can't let that history repeat itself. But at the same time, if history repeats itself, Tank becomes a megastar while doing low risk, high reward, but he's not. So that tells me that it's not just the O when it comes to Floyd. Floyd is always the exception to the rule. Floyd's always the exception to the rule. Being a strategic fighter throwing 35 to 40 punches per round, clinching on the inside, using your elbows, fighting that type of style does not attract fans. What attracts fans? It could be the
But
lore
there's two
of the
things,
O.
Alex. If I may, there's two
Uh-huh.
things. Florida's fighting in an era, okay, where HBO Championship Boxing did like 2 million viewers, 3 million
Mhm.
viewers. You know what I mean? So boxing was just in a better place in terms of popularity. That's number one. Okay. So he had more visibility. He was coming out of the Olympics. He had a lot of advantages over Tank. And the other thing is exactly what you said. He went through a gauntlet early in his career, and that gave him, like the new kids say now, clout, right? Like he was undefeated after he went through the fire. That's what made it impressive, right? He was the undefeated fighters all the time in boxing. Like, and we could just tell, like, like, okay, that dude's record's padded. Like, you couldn't say Floyd's record was padded, right? From 130, from the Corraleses to the Castillos, Jesus Chavez, right? He fought good fighters, all right? And he went through the fire, and that's what made the undefeated record impressive. It wasn't a padded undefeated record. Where now, it's safe to say, ladies and gentlemen, that Tank Davis has a padded record, right? That's what it is. That's the big difference. And that's why the zero doesn't resonate like with Tank like that. You know what I mean?
I still got to push back on this though, because the Oscar fight introduced Floyd to the
Right.
world, correct?
It did.
Floyd beating Oscar, and those numbers were mostly due to Oscar and Floyd. Yes, being a strong B side, he had a lot to do with it, but he was the B side. That was Oscar for the most part. He was
Yeah,
the A side.
but like I gotta give Floyd some credit. Like Oscar doubled what he ever made. You know what I
Right,
mean?
true,
Numbers
true,
wise. Like
true.
and it was at 24/7 was revolutionary at the time.
Right,
You know what I mean?
but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, I think Floyd still, with the one loss, the fight still does great. So let's say he
True.
beats Oscar. Then let's say he beats Ricky Hatton, which he did. Floyd at that point with one loss is still a huge
Absolutely.
star. Beating
Especially like
Oscar,
avenging the loss, especially.
beating Ricky Hatton. I think he's a pay-per-view star after that, even with the
Yeah.
loss.
And we have to ask ourselves, how much bigger is the Oscar fight if Floyd's the guy that's coming off beating Casasu, he beat Okoto, Margarito, and then he's fighting Oscar De La Hoya. Maybe it does help sell the fight more, but unfortunately, Calix, the guys that make the legacy, and maybe I'm basing it too much on 2022, and maybe I shouldn't be doing that. But in 2022, I don't see the guys that take the risk, that are fighting the best, get rewarded like that. You know what I mean? Like it's
Mhm.
almost like they do it because they want to, it's for their legacy. But I'm seeing guys that aren't doing much because they're popular on social media, right? And because they're undefeated, like they're getting pushed more. Like it's the era we're in, you know.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch because we get what we it's incentives, right? We
Right.
incentivize fighters to do that, but it's frustrating when a
But maybe
Devin
you're
Haney
right.
it's frustrating when a Devin Haney has all the belts, and yet Tank is being talked about
But
more,
you know
and
what
Tank is being
though?
promoted as
Uh,
the guy at lightweight.
since this is Days of Futures Past, like, does today's mentality even exist? Is it even a thing? If Floyd loses to Castillo and then he takes on bigger challenges, and that's the example that's being set, right? It was the same example set by De La Hoya before him. And then when they clash, maybe it's just as big, if not bigger, right? Who knows? There's no way to know. And maybe the mentality we see today doesn't exist. But
The mentality is
yeah,
much different. I'm hoping Canelo rubs off on people. Also, the other part of this is the market is much different now, and the market may be much different because the pay-per-view market back then was oversaturated.
right.
Oversaturated. A lot of it has to do with
Right.
the economy right now, but the market was just oversaturated with pay-per-views in the Mayweather Pacquiao era, and now the PBC is doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on pay-per-views as well. And I don't see a pay-per-view star coming around like that again. And I think these guys expect to be, I'm going to be the next Mayweather. I'm going to be the next guy to do it. I don't think that guy's coming around. Like,
You know what boxing does with pay-per-view, bro? It reminds me of like when they first started putting like labels on the record labels, like what was it like? What, that little white
parental
label,
advisory.
parental advisory. You know what I mean? So like it got to a point where like artists wanted that label on there. Like, no, you got to put it like that. That's because people are going to think we're like whatever. They're going to think we're pop stars if we don't put that shit on there. Like I think like and it was a selling point that there was a parental advisory that made it cool. You know what I mean? That's what boxing, they just put pay-per-view because they want to say it was on pay-per-view. That's what the Tank Davis fans do. Like, oh, he's a pay-per-view star. Haney hasn't been on pay-per-view. Lomachenko hasn't been on pay-per-view. Tank has. Okay, but he sold at the most 225,000. At the most. So it's not like he's like, it's just they just want to say he was on pay-per-view. Like, that's all it is. Like at the end of the day, like it's cool. Like that makes you official.
Yes, it's a marketing ploy.
100.
Yeah, and just because you fought on pay-per-view, now you're a pay-per-view fighter, right? But guess what? Luis Ortiz is about to fight on pay-per-view. Is he a pay-per-view fighter?
Yeah, and here's what I want from the PBC fighters, bro. Speaking of Pretty Boy Floyd's people, his management team, and himself, they said, I want Gerardo Hernandez. The first response that they got was, no, hold on, calm down. We got to develop you. You're not ready yet. Blah, 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 blah. I don't know. We want to. And he insisted. And he said, no, I want to fight this dude. I'm ready. And he got it, right? We need more of these PBC fighters, less. Well, I don't know. I'm going to wait and see what Al Heyman says and more. Al Heyman, I want this fight. Come on. I want it. More of that.
We need more fighters taking control of their career and telling their promoters, hey, even though I'm told it doesn't work that way, you're working for me. Make the fight.
But you know what, though? Like, I remember I saw, like, an interview by Nelly. All right? I know you're a big Nelly fan. But like, he was, like, defending the mumble rappers. Like, oh, hey, it's just a new way. It's just the way it is now. You guys got to respect. You know, the new artists and be more understanding. They're good. I'm like, bro, they're mumble rapping. Like, they suck. Okay? And then, like, but he's defending it. But I feel, isn't that like with Hopkins and Mayweather? Isn't that what they're doing? Okay, it's a new era, guys. It's not about the belts no more. It's about Instagram and it's about Hopkins is doing an alley in this shit, bro. Like he's talking about how it doesn't matter about, so that's a thing of the past, and like it's not about that anymore, and it's about what you bring, how many people come to see you fight, and Leonard Allerby saying Floyd's the face of boxing, like dude's like retired and shit, but he's the face of boxing. You know what I mean? Like this is where we're at, bro. Like Floyd Mayweather, I saw an interview where they try to give him credit, like, hey, these young fighters are not doing what you did when you were a pretty boy, and then like. He kind of like was like, nah, Top Rank wasn't doing the right thing. When I left Top Rank, I became a big star. He kind of like looks at that Pretty Boy stage like maybe just thinking about the money he made. It's like, oh, I was getting shafted. That wasn't the right way to go. That was bullshit. Like, you know what I mean? But like that's like the best run he had, like legacy wise. You know what I mean? Hopkins, like, he's just downplaying the fucking belts, bro. Like this shit's sad. So look. I want to continue this series. Next week, we're going to do what if Oscar De La Hoya got a decision against Trinidad and how different the immediate, and maybe we could go as far as now, how different things would be.
He should have gotten that decision, but more on that next week because that still to this day.
But like again, like what if he got it?
I still can't believe he fought those last 3 rounds like that though. Horrible.
No, I agree with you. Like, what if he didn't fight those last 2 rounds like that? What if he just got the decision? How different would have things been? What if we got in a rematch? Would Oscar been the one that went on that tear at 154 instead of Trinidad? What he would have fought? Like, we'll talk about it next week. But you guys got to join us for that one, man. That's going to be fun.
I want to get to this question real quick because I think it's important to the chat and what we're talking about. Are hardcore boxing fans allowed to be a fan of a certain fighter without being ridiculed or talked down upon? And just to answer that, yes. But here's the thing. Here's where it goes sideways. when you try to tell people that the sky is green when it comes to your favorite fighter. That's the issue. Nobody's saying you can't be a fan of Floyd. Just be a fan of Floyd. That's fine. Be a fan of Manny. Be a fan of Andre Ward. Be a fan of Arturo Gatti. Whoever you want to be a fan of. But you have to be able to keep it real about your favorite fighter. That's why I tell people, like, do this exercise. It helps you. Do this exercise every week. Say something negative about your favorite fighter, and you can do it in your head. Say something positive about your least favorite fighter. It helps. It helps with your bias, but
Jesus.
but it helps. But what I'm saying is, you have to be able to keep it real. I was able to keep it real with Arturo Gatti. We knew he was going to lose to Mayweather. We knew he was going to lose to De La Hoya. We knew he was a level beneath those guys. We knew it. We knew it. And we don't have to say that he's great. I was a big Miguel Cotto fan. Why are you fighting Antonio Margarito in the second fight at the catchweight? Why? Why are you doing that? Same thing with Pacquiao. Why all these catchweights? Same thing with Canelo. Why were you fighting Matthew Hatton at a catchweight? You have to be able to keep it real about your favorite fighter. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, you just gotta keep it real, bro. A lot of people just don't keep it real, and they don't know what keeping it real means. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, remember that whatever argument you make, right, have it be of substance. Have it be like a core value you have, because the more like circumstances, because a lot of things in boxing repeat themselves. All right, a lot. Boxing is a pattern sport. Like a lot of situations, circumstances, they repeat themselves, right? So if you score fights a certain way because you don't like that one fighter, you like the other fighter, so you start making an argument as to why you scored it that way. Guess what? In the future, one of your favorite fighters is gonna fight the way that you argued shouldn't win you the fight, and then you're going to look hypocritical arguing that he won the fight because of that. That's just an example, right? If you are against catchweights, be against catchweights because you're just against catchweights. Don't do it because the guy requesting a catchweight is a fighter you don't like. Because if you do it for that, guess what's going to happen the moment one of your favorite fighters requests a catchweight? All of a sudden, you're going to look hypocritical, right? Like if you're against whatever it is, just remember you got to be against that all the time, right? You can't flip it around and act different because now one of your favorite fighters is doing it. Make sure everything revolves around your values, not around your favorite fighter. If you do that, you're not going to go wrong. It's not going to steer you wrong. It just isn't. It may be uncomfortable. You may have to say something negative about a fighter you like, but that's healthy. That is keeping it real, right? And that's just the truth, right? And don't be worried about the cavalry coming after you. And you know what I mean? And don't make up stories about cavalry's coming after you either. Like just say what you feel, be what you are, and that's that. It's as simple as that.
And it helps if you keep it consistent with your values and consistent with the type of fighters you like as well. If you like, it helps if you like fighters who fight top competition. But I guess my ultimate point in this video would be, it's frustrating where we're at as a boxing fan. We've had a good year. But then I look at the schedule for the rest of the year and I see Crawford hasn't fought since November. Errol hasn't fought since April, and they still don't have the fight done. They'll likely not make Tank versus Ryan. We got to wait till January to get Jamel versus Tim Tszyu. It doesn't look like the late year schedule is developing the way we thought it was going to be, on pace with what we saw from the beginning of the year. And a lot of it has to do with these guys are cautious. These are cautious. We need an aggressive face of boxing. And the thing is, the troubling thing about this to me is we have that. Canelo's an aggressive face of boxing. He's doing the things we want him to do. Anthony Joshua, in a way, same way. He's not fighting as often as we like, but guess what? He's fighting the top guys available to him. He's trying to become a 3-time heavyweight champion. He's carrying himself well. So we have the two biggest faces of the sport globally who are doing what we want them to do. But the problem is not many guys are following their lead. That's the troubling part.
Right.
This stench of the Mayweather protect your old era is sticking around like bad cigarette smoke.
That's why Castillo should have won.
And we need to get it off of us. And
Man.
that's why I want to see more guys follow the lead of the Canelos, Anthony Joshua's. I don't care if they lose.
Because,
Don't
bro, like,
care.
it's the old thing, protecting the old. It honestly, it creates gridlock, bro. Like, it creates gridlock in his divisions. Like, try to imagine a division where there's 5 like amazing fighters, right? Now, a regular boxing fan, I would think anyway, right? Like, I'm not one to tell people what's a fan and what's not. I'm just saying, like, you would think you want to see those guys fight each other. Like, we got 5 great fighters in this division. You know what? Line them all up against each other. I want all of them to fight each other. That's just like, I'm not like the dude that's like, okay, well, not you, but you 4 fight, or not you 2. You 2 are more popular, so stay over here. Let these 3 fight each other. Like, no. Like, I want all 5 to fight each other, right? Because I want to see the good fights. You know what I mean? That's what I want to see. But if they all are like, well, I don't want to risk my own. So number 1 fights a 10th ranked dude, and number 2 fights a guy ranked 13th, and number 3 fights like a prospect like Raleigh or something. You know what I mean? Number 4 fights like the dude like number 6 or something. Number 5 fights the dude that's ranked 28th. You know what I mean? Because they're protecting their own. What are we doing here? Like at that point, what's the point? What's the point if they're not going to fight each other? Oh, but they're protecting their O's. They're undefeated, though. There's no blueprint to beat them. Well, there's not going to be any blueprint to beat them, and they're protecting themselves, right? Like, I want to see these guys fight. And without them, if the mentality was different, the mentality was, I'm competitive. I want to fight the best motherfucker. Let's go, right? And they all fight each other. Maybe one, they can't all come out undefeated. It's impossible. Those 5 guys they're just as good. They're all great fighters, but if they all fight each other, they're going to come out with losses. If we're lucky, one of them comes out undefeated if they all fight each other, right? But we need to incentivize guys to fight each other. That's what we need to incentivize. That should be the trajectory. If they all fight each other, it's unlikely any of them do. But if maybe one of them comes out undefeated, and that makes the undefeated thing impressive, if they actually fight people.
And in that scenario, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Lifts all ships. They all get better from it. They all get a bigger name from it.
Steel sharpens steel. Iron sharpens iron.
67% of the chat says that fight that night, if Floyd would have gotten the L, his career would have gone on much different. We'd had a much different case. But D-Style, this poster behind me, right here, they all had L's.
They fought each other.
Look how we view them. It was a much different market than where boxing was bigger. I get
that
it.
Example I just gave you, that fought, they're right there.
They're right there. They're right there. And we have legitimate stars back, especially when we talk about Sugar Ray Leonard. Legitimate star even after the L, going to my point. Now, it was a much different era, and Ray Leonard was a much different marketable dude than Floyd Mayweather. But I just tend to think,
dude,
even
Duran
with the
fought
L,
Hagler, bro. Duran fought fucking Marvin Hagler. Floyd couldn't even fucking fight Martinez. Like, that's just the truth, dude. No, like, I love Martinez. He's great. You know what I mean? He had the same nickname, actually, and he looked up to Marvin, but he's no Marvin Hagler.
No, not even close. Marvin, one of the baddest to ever do it. And yeah, went up to middleweight and fought him. So on that note, man, great episode. What we doing tomorrow?
Hey, tomorrow's the roundtable on Ringside Reporter. I might go live tonight. I'm not sure yet. So don't hold me to it. Like, don't come at me like, why did you go live, motherfucker? Like, I'll see. But hey, man, great show. I think, I want to continue this. I want to have these discussions. Next week, I want to talk about what if the decision We're not changing the fight, Scott. We're just changing how the judges saw it. You know what I mean?
And we're
If the
not saying and we're not saying there were robberies.
right. If the judges just happened to give it to De La Hoya, how different would things would have been? So I want everybody to think about it and join us next week so we can talk about that one.
That's right. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We are out. Keep it boxing, and God